The sun had barely risen, but the soundstage was already alive with activity. Trucks rumbled into the lot, unloading crates of equipment. Assistants scurried across the glossy floors, juggling coffees and call sheets, while the hum of voices filled the air as crew members discussed lighting setups and camera angles. The production was massive, a high-stakes crime drama with a budget that could rival most blockbusters. Yet for everyone on set, the true centerpiece of this film wasn't its budget. It was Robert De Niro. De Niro, a name synonymous with Hollywood greatness, arrived quietly, as he always did. There were no grand entrances, no entourage. Instead, he walked into the soundstage dressed in a gray sweater and slacks, holding a weathered script in one hand and a simple cup of coffee in the other. For most, seeing him in person felt surreal. Here was the man who had brought some of cinema's most iconic characters to life, from Taxi Driver's Travis Bickle to The Godfather Part II's Vito Corleone. Yet despite his legendary status, De Niro carried himself with a calm humility that put everyone at ease. "Morning," he said softly, nodding to a group of technicians adjusting a camera rig. They smiled back, their expressions a mix of awe and gratitude. Working with someone like De Niro wasn't just a job, it was a privilege. At the far end of the soundstage, however, a very different energy was brewing. Ryan Chase, Hollywood's newest heartthrob, made his entrance as if the set were his stage. At just 28, Ryan had skyrocketed to fame with a string of blockbuster hits that had solidified him as the next big thing. His chiseled jawline, piercing blue eyes, and smoldering on-screen presence had earned him a legion of fans and an ego to match. Dressed in a leather jacket that seemed almost too perfect and wearing sunglasses indoors, Ryan strode onto the set, his footsteps echoing loudly against the polished floor. He flashed a confident smile at anyone who looked his way, seemingly unaware of, or uninterested in, the whispers his arrival triggered. "All right, people," he said, clapping his hands together. "Let's make some magic." The crew exchanged glances. Ryan's reputation had preceded him. He was talented, no doubt about it, but his arrogance often left a sour taste. He was known for questioning directors, dismissing advice, and treating veteran actors with a kind of casual indifference that bordered on disrespect. Today would be no different. This was Ryan's first time working with De Niro, and while he recognized the older actor's name, he didn't hold the same reverence as others on set. "Look, I get it, he's a legend," Ryan had said during a pre-production meeting, "but times change. People want something fresh now. I respect him, but I've got my own style." The first scene of the day was a pivotal one, an intense confrontation between De Niro's character, a weary mob boss nearing the end of his reign, and Ryan's character, a brash enforcer hungry for power. The director, a veteran filmmaker with multiple awards to his name, gathered the cast and crew for a pre-shoot briefing. He explained the scene's stakes in detail, emphasizing the layers of emotion required from both actors. De Niro listened intently, nodding as the director spoke. Then, as was his habit, he asked a few thoughtful questions, delving into the motivations behind his character's actions. "It's not just about what he says," De Niro explained. "It's what he doesn't say. The silences between the lines, they're just as important." Ryan, who had been idly scrolling through his phone during the discussion, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "I think I've got it," he said, cutting off the conversation. "No need to overthink it, right?" The room went silent. A few crew members glanced nervously at De Niro, wondering how he would respond. But De Niro simply smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve of his lips, and nodded. "All right," he said. "Let's see what you got." When the cameras rolled, Ryan launched into his performance with the confidence of someone who believed he had already won. He hit his marks perfectly, delivered his lines with precision, and added just the right amount of bravado to his character. But for those watching closely, something was missing. His delivery, while polished, lacked the depth and authenticity the scene demanded. There was no vulnerability, no nuance, just a superficial gloss that felt hollow next to De Niro's presence. De Niro, by contrast, was mesmerizing. Even in a rehearsal take, his performance was layered and complex. His character's frustration, disappointment, and unspoken grief came through in every gesture, every pause. It wasn't just acting, it was living the scene. He adjusted his tone, his posture, his gaze, subtly, intentionally, to give Ryan opportunities to react, to dig deeper into his own performance. But Ryan, blinded by his own confidence, didn't notice. When the director called cut, Ryan leaned back with a self-satisfied grin. "Not bad for a first take, huh?" he said, glancing at De Niro. His tone was casual, almost dismissive, as if he were speaking to a peer rather than one of the greatest actors of all time. De Niro simply nodded. "It's a good start," he said softly. The day continued, and as the hours wore on, Ryan's behavior grew increasingly grating. During breaks, he could be heard loudly recounting tales of his rise to fame to anyone who would listen. "Acting's not rocket science," he declared at one point, leaning back in his chair. "You just need presence. That's what people connect with. All this method acting stuff, it's overrated." Meanwhile, De Niro remained quiet, sitting off to the side with his script and a notebook. He didn't say a word about Ryan's remarks, but his silence carried a weight that seemed to make others uneasy. The turning point came late in the afternoon. The crew was preparing to shoot the climactic confrontation between their characters. It was a high-stakes scene, charged with emotion and tension. Before the cameras rolled, De Niro approached the director. "Let's try something," he said. "Let's improvise this one. See where it takes us." The director agreed immediately, trusting De Niro's instincts. Ryan, overhearing the conversation, frowned. "Improv?" he muttered under his breath. "All right, sure. Let's see what happens." What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary. As the cameras rolled, De Niro transformed. His voice cracked with anger, his eyes brimmed with unspoken pain, and every word he spoke felt like a dagger. He wasn't just performing, he was inhabiting the character, pouring decades of experience and understanding into every moment. The energy in the room shifted. Crew members stopped what they were doing to watch, drawn in by the sheer intensity of his performance. Ryan, by contrast, faltered. De Niro's authenticity exposed the hollowness of his own delivery. His lines came out rushed, his timing was off, and for the first time, he looked unsure of himself. It wasn't just that De Niro was outshining him, it was that he was revealing the depth Ryan had yet to reach. When the director called cut, the room erupted into applause. Ryan, standing across from De Niro, looked stunned. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by an expression of uncertainty. He had just witnessed what acting could be, and for the first time, he realized how much he had to learn. That evening, Ryan knocked on the door of De Niro's trailer. The older actor opened the door and studied Ryan for a moment. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone polite but guarded. Ryan hesitated. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been a jerk. I thought I knew everything. But today you showed me how much I have to learn." De Niro's expression softened. "Come in," he said simply. Inside the trailer, the two talked for hours. De Niro shared stories from his early career, moments of doubt and failure, and the lessons he had learned along the way. "The moment you think you've got it all figured out," he told Ryan, "that's when you stop growing." From that day on, Ryan's attitude changed. He began arriving on set early, asking questions and observing De Niro closely. The two developed a bond, and by the end of the shoot, Ryan's performance had transformed. Years later, as Ryan stood on stage accepting his first major acting award, he looked out into the audience and saw De Niro sitting in the front row. "This is for Robert De Niro," he said, his voice steady. "He didn't just teach me how to act. He taught me how to grow, how to listen, and how to respect the craft." The applause was deafening, but De Niro simply smiled. For him, the greatest reward wasn't the accolades. It was knowing he had passed on a piece of his wisdom to the next generation. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire and challenge us to grow. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Let us know in the comments below.